as CG.0, but then I'm going to change the X origin. So I'm going to have that drop start out at the top, and I'm just going to put it at a random spot across the X. The size, I'm going to define a nice little, let's do a static const CG size. We'll call this drop size equals, and I'll make it like 40 by 40, but I'm going to make this be a static const as opposed to making it be a property or something, because I don't want to write the code right now to deal with the fact that someone changes this, because I'd probably have to redraw my whole thing to have smaller squares, right, or something like that, which is cool, would be great to do, but it's just time constraints, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to have the frame size be this drop size, so that I'm creating a little drop view, okay, and that's the size I want it to be. So here I'll do my random, actually let's go ahead and do this. Let's go to here. Let's go just pick a random place along the x-axis. So I'm going to do arc4 random, and we're going to mod that by the self.gameView.bounds.size.width, so somewhere along some random spot along there. And I'm also going to make it be lined up so the drops are, in a grid. So I'm just going to divide by the drop size.width, and then I'm going to multiply by saying, oops, frame.origin.x equals x times the drop size.width. So you see here, I've divided it here. This is an int, so it's basically going to do a floor, right? I've picked a int, and then I just multiply it back. That puts it at a random spot across. And then I create a view just by saying drop view equals UI view alloc init with frame, which is the designated initializer for view, and I'll specify this frame. And then I'm going to set the drop view's background color to be a random color. Okay, I happen to have a little snippet here for that, random color. Okay, so random color just picks one of 5 random colors, okay, right here. And then let's just go ahead and self.gameView, add subview, drop view. Okay, so it's as simple as that to drop something on here. So unless I've forgotten something or doing something wrong, let's go ahead and run. And every time I tap, we get another one. So that's great. So they're collecting at the top. That's nice. Now we're going to add some gravity so that they fall down. Okay, animated, right? So they fall down. So how do we do that? Very simple. We're just going to create an animator. Let's go have a property which is strong non-atomic, which is a UI dynamic animator. And I'm also going to have a property which is strong and non-atomic, which is a gravity behavior. I'll call it gravity. I'm keeping these names short kind of for a reason, but you might want to call it gravity behavior. I'm going to go ahead and do some lazy instantiation here. So let's get our dynamic animator. If not animator, then I want to create one. Otherwise, I'm going to return it. Okay, so as I said, when we create the animator, it's just UI dynamic animator alloc init with reference view. And the reference view is just our game view, right? That view that I dragged out, that generic view. It's perfectly fine for that reference view to be a generic view. And then the gravity one, similar kind of deal. If the gravity is not set, then we'll create it, and we'll return it. And creating a gravity thing is very simple. We just say on gravity equals UI gravity behavior alloc init. Okay, I'm going to do one other thing here too, is I'm going to say self.animator add behavior. Okay, so anytime someone asks me for the gravity thing, I'm going to add it to my animator. But this is only going to happen once, right, because it's my lazy instantiator. So that's good. That's exactly what I want. I could also in here set things like the gravity's magnitude, right? So I could say, light gravity instead of 1.0, a little lighter or whatever. Okay? So now I have an animator. I have a gravity behavior. All I need to do now is add this drop view, okay, that I created to that. So I'm just going to say self.gravity add item. my drop view. Okay? So now that the instant I do that, it's going to start animating. So let's take a look at that. So you can see as I click, they immediately start animating. Okay? And, sorry. And, but they're falling off the bottom. Okay? So that's not so good. I want them to stop at the bottom. So to do that, I just need a collision behavior. Very easy. Just go up here. Property, strong, non-atomic, UI collision behavior, collider, I'm going to call it. And my collider, if my collider's not set, oops, then I'll set it. Turn the collider. I really should have a snippet for that kind of thing. I think Johan showed that in this Friday section. So that equals UI collision behavior, alloc init. And here I'm also going to set the bounds, oops, to yes. So I'm going to have this collider use the bounds of the reference view as its bounds. Okay, so it's a one-line thing to get that in there. But I could make, you know, a nice UI Bezier path, you know, like down on the bottom, whatever I wanted. But then it suits my purposes here just to use the whole translation thing. And I'm going to do the same thing here, self.animator, add behavior, this collider, okay, so that it gets added to the animator. So again, I need to add any items that I want to be affected by the collider to the collider. And now it's going to, as soon as I do that, if something hit it, it would start colliding. All right, so let's take a look at that. Okay, so hopefully they drop, they bomb. Notice they have a little bounce to them, a little bounce in their step. Okay. Now notice that they tilt a little. Okay, why does that happen? Well, on the way down, okay, the two, they landed, one was bouncing and the next one hit it, and there was a little bit of real world bounce to it. Now, probably if we're building a Tetris game, we don't want them to rotate and get off center like that. So we would have to, A, not allow rotation probably, and B, we might want to grid them up. And I don't think we're going to get that in the demo, but maybe on Wednesday after we get to that, I'll post how you would actually do that. Okay, and all we're going to do is when they collide, we're going to have them line themselves up. Okay, so we'll do that later on Wednesday. Okay, notice that I have these two very related behaviors, gravity and collider. They really go together. Okay, so this is where I might want to create a custom UI behavior. So let's do that real quick. So I'm just going to go File, New File, okay, New Class, and this class is going to be a UI dynamic behavior, and I'm going to call it the drop it behavior. Okay, and that is going to be a new behavior I'm creating that's going to have the gravity and the collider, and eventually some more things, as child behaviors. Okay, so let's just hit next. It's where it wants to put it. This is all good. Here it is. Okay, here's my drop it behavior. And all I'm going to do in this drop it behavior is I'm going to define a couple of methods here. Add item, which allows you to add a UI dynamic item. Notice that I'm using this protocol syntax. And then I'm also going to let you remove an item. Okay, and that's all I'm going to implement in my drop it behavior, except for I'm going to override its init. Okay, so what am I going to do in its init? So instance type init. I'm going to do self equals super init. So that's UI dynamic behaviors init. Oops. All right. And then return self. And then in between here, all I'm going to do is add child behaviors for the gravity and the collider, which I'm actually going to copy and paste to save ourselves a lot of time. Here's a nice little lazy instantiation of these. And let's go grab the, oops, let's grab the outlets for these. Grab those. Oops, sorry, I keep clicking on the wrong button on the right. Okay, so this is @ interface, drop it behavior. Oops, paste, hello, paste, end. Okay, so we got those, that's good. These lines, we're not going to add it to the animator because we're going to add this whole behavior to the animator, so we can get rid of those. And in add item, which we'll put right here, Actually, let's go ahead and copy and paste these two things that we want. Add item and remove item. Okay, all I need to do here is add them to each of my sub-behaviors. So I'll do add item to my gravity and add item to my collider. And I'll do the same thing for remove. Okay, except for we want this to be remove. Okay, so this is a common pattern here. You create basically a dynamic behavior that it has child behaviors, and in the add item, you might also have add items, you might have init with items, whatever. And then here we're going to add child behaviors, the gravity, and the collider. Okay, so we've created a new class here. It's a subclass of UI dynamic behavior. We can add items to it, just like we added items to our gravity and our collider. And its implementation is merely to have these little sub behaviors. Okay, very, very simple. And when we go back to our controller here, we need to, instead of having the individual ones, now we're just going to have a drop it, # import, a drop it behavior. We're just going to have a drop it behavior. Okay, we'll put a little lazy instantiation for this one too. Oops. So there's alloc init. That's going to call that other init that we just did. We'll do self.animator add behavior, our drop it behavior. Right? And then we'll just return our drop it behavior like that. And now down here, we don't have to add these separately. We're just going to say drop it behavior, add item, like that. Okay, so everyone understand how we kind of grouped all that stuff over there? And we're going to add more things as this demo goes on to this kind of general drop it behavior. And we're going to add them over in that other class now. We're still going to add other behaviors that we add here that really aren't part of that other thing. But now we've at least collected that into a nice space over there. So hopefully that didn't break anything. Let's see. It didn't. Okay, it's all still working, which is awesome. So now what I want to do is, when I get a full row like that, I want it to blow up. Okay? And I'm going to do the blow up not using a dynamic animator. Okay? I'm going to do that with that UI view animation business, because I want to show you how you can mix the two together, and they'll work fine. Okay, so let's do that. So how are we going to do that? Well, one question is, when can I start thinking about doing other animation when I've got this dynamic animator going off and doing all these things, bouncing and colliding and all that stuff? And the answer is, you can find out when an animator reaches quiescent state, when nothing's bouncing, everything is resolved, okay, when it's quiet. Okay? And you do that using a delegate for the animator. So if I go to Animator here, there is a property on Animator called delegate.